Hello there YouTube, it's that time of the month once again where we take a look at the meta for Mythic Plus, this time for tanks and healers, because if you have been aware, or maybe you haven't, there have been buffs and nerfs to a bunch of these tanks and healers where the meta has changed, maybe, please, but we're not gonna make it boring because we're gonna take a look at Blood Decay right smack dab down in the middle of the tier list. Now, pretty much all of these specs, and you'll see it on the screen with the top 10 players of each spec and what kind of keys they clear. You can see the little number there. Blood Decay is doing pretty well. I don't suspect, let's say, for Blood Decay to do anything better than what it's doing right now. Maybe a key or two higher, but in terms of relative performance compared to the other tanks, B tier is probably where it's going to be in terms of maybe about 2 key levels behind the S tier tanks. Blood Decay, unfortunately, is kind of hitting a cap. It's looking to be one of the worst tanks towards the end of the season. In terms of the overall performance, that still means that it's clearing high keys, but you're going to get to that point with Blood Decay where you're just going to get globaled really quick. That aside, it wouldn't be doing Blood Decay any justice if we didn't talk about its actual value into the key outside of you just dying in 1 second. And I cannot emphasize how good the grips are this season, particularly in dungeons like Priory of the Sacred Flame, where people have to do some really quirky pulls at the beginning part of the dungeon to save a lot of time, and those pulls are so much better with grips. Not even Vengeance Demon Hunter can use Sigil of Chains to kind of mitigate the fact that they don't have grips. So I'm happy with Blood Decay B tier. We're probably never gonna see it S tier until it's broken. You need fun and performance in real life as well, so why not get a career that aims to give you both? I'm talking about today's sponsor, Boot.dev, an online learning platform that teaches you back-end web development from start to finish in Python, Golang, and SQL. And I meant it when I said fun, because the way Boot.dev approaches their lessons and courses is by structuring them into an RPG game, where each course awards you experience points upon completion. You also have quests that can steer you to complete a certain set of tasks, and achievements that give your profile score and help set you up on a leaderboard. That's the fun aspect of it, to keep you engaged, since Boot.dev believes that never getting bored is the best and smartest way to learn anything, especially something that can set you up with a banger of a career. No, really, back-end web developing is a pretty good choice as a job, and there are studies to back this up. Stack Overflow analyzed some data and put out some numbers. The median salary in the US in 2024 for this particular job description was over $100,000. How does it all work though? Well, first of all, you can demo the courses and have access to every course in a basic way to figure out what you are interested in. I mentioned Python, Golang, and SQL, but in reality there are so many more courses to get into for all sorts of languages. On top of that, the courses themselves are structured in such a way that you will learn step by step how to write code, and a lot of code at that. Because what better way to learn and become proficient than through sheer repetition? And as WoW players, we know all about that, don't we? There are plenty of resources to assist you along the way, should you get stuck or unsure about any particular course. Boot.dev has a Discord community with very helpful people and even a built-in AI, Boot, that can assist you with all sorts of issues. And if you still decide it isn't for you, there is a 30-day no questions asked refund policy for your subscription, which you can get at a discount by using our code Marcelian for 25% off of your first transaction, whether it is for a monthly sub or a yearly one. Of course, in this process, you would be supporting us as well. Click the link in the description to get started right away, and thank you Boot.dev for sponsoring this video. For Brewmaster though, this has been a happy surprise after the buffs from its previous iteration of the worst performing tank across the board to climbing a tier higher. Now, we are putting it into B tier because if we look at the top 10 Brewmasters compared to, let's see, the top 10 Blood Decays and the top 10 Vengeance, which we'll get to. Brewmaster is about 1 to 2 keys below. I believe the top players are doing 19s at the moment, and the top Brewmasters are about 17s and 18s, depending on when you watch this video. And it's doing a lot better, actually. The damage has been improved, and the tankiness has been improved a little bit. It could just be that it's just barely above the limit where you're allowed to do high keys. It's not you're not gonna have revolutionary damage output. You're not gonna be tankier than, let's say, like a Prot Warrior, not even talking about Vengeance Demon Hunter. So don't expect particular greatness. Brewmaster can just do some crazy stuff that other tanks cannot. You have a lot of mobility, which is really good. Ring of Peace is really good. A lot of the very good DPS specs this season are physical damage, like marksmanship, like I wanted to say warrior, but I'm not convinced yet. But rogues are picking up a lot of steam as well. Arms Warrior is doing really well, and of course there are a lot of other DPSers that have a physical damage component, like Prot Paladin, which is also a highly respected spec in pushing keys. Obviously it's not the meta, it's not S tier, but that's why it's A tier, not S tier. Discipline Priest, after nerfs, it's retained its premier spot as an S tier level healer. And that's probably because it's just really good, and its kit is really good. Pain Suppress and being on 2 charges is amazing as an external defensive, one of the strongest external defenses in the game, period. Together with Power Word Barrier just makes it really good at accomplishing some really gnarly, I don't want to say healing checks, because it's reducing the amount of damage everybody takes. So I guess you're making healing checks more accessible, or transforming lethal encounters into healing check encounters, which is not something that all healers can. Probably Holy Paladin is the only other one that can maybe even do that, prevent people from getting one shot by adding damage reduction. Discipline Priest just does it way better than every other priest. Obviously the nerfs to its shields has been significant. The nerfs to the penance have been significant, and is still doing really well. That just goes to show how strong Discipline Priest has been over the course of the last couple of months, but that still means that the other healers are still really good. One of which is Holy Paladin, and this is a spec that we need to take a pause on and reflect on how Holy Paladin is not in its best state, but how one particular Holy Paladin is out of his mind. And of course, I'm talking about Ellesmere. When we look at these data, or at this data rather, for our tier list, when we do these kind of tier lists, we look at the top 10 players. So eventually we're going to narrow down on some of the best players in the world for their respective specs. And I think Ellesmere deserves a shout out for actually showing what we're saying almost every tier list that we do, is that if you're a good enough player, gonna shine above everybody else. And Ellesmere, as of recording this, is the top 10. Is not the top 10 healer. It's has cleared the top 10 best dungeon in the world, on top of the Sea of Discipline Priests, which is really good. He's also the second non-discipline priest healer in the ranking as well, for holding off the record for the next best healer after discipline priest, as also still Holy Paladin and still himself. It is really actually awesome seeing that happen. Now, he is single-handedly carrying the entire spec, so we cannot really rank Holy Paladin based off of Ellesmere, because he's not normal. If we would, that would be an S tier spec right up there with Discipline. Now, does that mean that Ellesmere is just eating differently than the rest of us, or does that mean that Holy Paladin actually has the potential to be S tier spec? You will have to find out by playing it yourself, of course. Holy Priest doesn't feel like it's there yet, though. Even though it's kind of sharing a tier with Holy Paladin, obviously it's doing a little bit better after the buff, same as a Holy Paladin, but we're probably not going to see it rise any higher anytime soon, possibly because it doesn't bring any inherent value over Discipline Priest. For the longest time, Holy Priest has been better than Discipline because of its very superior throughput and damage output as well, which is not the case at the moment, because if you don't have HPS numbers and DPS numbers way over Discipline Priest, there's no real reason to bring you, because Discipline Priest, if it brings similar throughput, it also brings much better defensives, which unfortunately Holy Priest just does not have whatsoever. So until I believe the healing system gets reworked entirely, where people don't just lose their entire HP bar in 2 seconds, and healers don't just fill an entire HP bar in 2 seconds, we probably won't see pure throughput healers ranked anytime higher, unless their just overall tuning is off the charts, which is the same thing with specs like Blood, Death Knight in that case. Bear is not doing too shabby, with, I believe, Squish Vegan being the first non-Vengeance Demon Hunter tank to rank it all the way up in the dungeon clearing leaderboards. Bear is pretty strong. It's still, I guess, suffering a little bit from the DPS output. And if you don't have a balanced druid, you're probably the best next druid spec to bring to a group. Debatable if it's Resto Druid or not. It seems like statistically speaking right now it is Bear. If you want that Mark of the Wild, then you have a tank spot that's free. You can definitely bring a Bear and be just fine. Outside of that, nothing really interesting is happening with Bear. Its utility kit is just the same. Its damage output is just the same. It's just as tanky. I guess you might argue that you might have an extra Curse Dispel for those Theater of Pain pulls. 1 pool. 2 pools for the Soulstorm ads? We'll see. But at least it's doing decently well for now. Mistweaver has received a bunch of nerfs over the course of this season, where it used to be, I think, S tier last time we did this tier list, and now it's kind of dipped a little bit into A tier. One of the main reasons you would have wanted a Mistweaver, and probably still want at this point, is Mystic Touch, but also a lot of damage. I think Mistweaver might still be the hero with the most amount of DPS out of all of the healers, which can be relevant, I guess. People argue for it a lot, and I understand mathematically that every little bit counts, but the little bit is so little that really, that's what's setting you apart? Because I would like healers and tanks to actually do more damage across the board. I would like that DPS to be a little bit more impactful, although a lot of people are just fine just having to heal. But I would, if the DPS is not high, I wouldn't want the DPS to be the reason you'd bring a healer, because it's so little importance at the moment. You probably want it for the vastly superior throughput that you can just muscle through a bunch of mechanics, which is great. And if you're playing a physical comp and you don't have a Brewmaster or a Windwalker, probably you won't have a Windwalker at all. You're probably better off bringing a Mistweaver, since Mistweaver and Brew are the better monk tanks in Mythic Plus, much to my chagrin. One unfortunate case would remain with Preservation, where it's still not seeing any spotlight whatsoever, and I cannot remember a time when Preservation was good past the season 1 when it was released in Dragonflight, where it had that crazy damage. Just goes to show how much raw strong throughput can do for a healer in terms of the overall performance. In terms of actual throughput, I'm sure Preservation does just fine with its HPS numbers. I would imagine that there are a lot of things that are holding a Preservation back. Now, if it's not the best at healing numbers, then it's not going to rise any higher, considering that it's probably the squishiest healer in this list. It has the shortest range out of everybody. It needs to move the most out of everybody. You do have maybe more dispels than other healers. You are also one of the only 2 healers that brings a Bloodlust in case you don't have a Shaman with you, or a Mage in that case, which is kind of unlikely. And you're not bringing a Power Infusion either if you do end up having a Mage or let's say a Shaman or even an Unholy Death Knight. So it's just very hard to justify bringing a Preservation, but not harder than other classes, which we'll get to soon. Prot Paladin still retains one of the best kits in terms of tank accessibility with utility in dungeons, as it has been the case last patch, as it has been the case before it was even buffed last patch, where it became the meta tank. And it still has the kit as of now, of course, but it is significantly squishier than a lot of the other tanks, and that's not something that you really want to have happen. And its damage has also been taken down quite a bit. So there were a lot of reasons why you would have wanted a Prot Paladin last season, and almost none of them are in this season, because it doesn't bring the most amount of damage out of all of the tanks. It's not the tankiest out of all of the tanks. It doesn't bring the best utility kit, because one of the strongest points of Prot Paladin would be its constant interrupts and silences effects from Avenger's Shield. Since we have way fewer casts this season, let's say, that's not a big issue anymore. Although, of course, when you have a Prot Paladin, you'll always really appreciate those Avenger's Shield kicks, or silences in this case. And it's still A tier. I mean, it's not that bad. I struggled finding a reason to rank it a little bit lower. Although, let's say top of the B tier and the bottom of the A tier is very close to each other. So it's not that far apart. Prot Warrior, however, started off as the numero uno tank, I believe, this season until it got some giga damage nerfs. And it's still the second best tank, statistically speaking, as of the moment, depending on who you ask. Because if you ask Archon.gg, once again, you probably see it on the screen right now, for some reason, Brewmaster's set as the second best tank, but I'm not sure what kind of data they use and how they aggregate it. From what we've seen right now, by just looking at the top 10 key pushers of each spec, Prot Warrior is just the second, almost S tier. So on the off chance that Vengeance Demon Hunter gets an even bigger nerf, it's likely that a lot of people will swap to Prot Warrior. It's the tankiest tank, possibly the tank with the most amount of damage, which is exactly what but probably all Prot Warriors have been asking for a long time, since they don't really have any redeeming qualities in terms of utility that they bring to a party. Battle Shout is meh. Rallying Cry is, oh my god, I for the longest time thought Rallying Cry was an atrocious 15% health increase for your party, but it turns out it's not even that, it's 10%. Terrible party cooldown for everybody. You don't bring a debuff, and the CC you bring is very mediocre, considering that every other tank has some variations of your CC. Vengeance Demon Hunter has Chaos Nova to your Shockwave. It has, I believe, it still has Fell Eruption to your Stormbolt. Plus, it has a lot of other stuff. Vengeance actually can talent into AoE Fear, while Prot Warrior has to sacrifice a little bit more to get Intimidating Shout, and that's also still debatable. Way worse version of an AoE Fear than the Vengeance Demon Hunter. So Prot Warrior is actually struggling, as has been for the past 2 to 3 expansions when it comes to the utility that it brings to a group. So at the very least, make it the tankiest and the one to do the most damage. Have something, which is the case right now, so I'm very grateful for that. Resto Druid was kind of speculated to be the second best hero in the game, although statistically speaking, it's still a smidge below Mistweaver in terms of the overall performance. Obviously, Resto Druid is doing really well. It's a very kind of hard to justify a reason to bring Resto Druid, because the #1 healer is not Resto Druid, and the #1 DPS is another Druid spec, and one of the top tanks is still a bear, which is, you know, still not a Resto Druid. So if you want a Mark of the Wild, although bringing it from Resto Druid is not that bad, and from what I understand, Resto Druid has pretty good throughput, there are 2 other Druid specs you would probably want before Resto Druid, but we're just arguing as to why a spec is at the bottom of A tier, bro. A tier. It's so good, guys. Play Resto Druid. It's absolutely cranking right now, and you will love all of the Resto Druid utility, or at least the second round of bear utility, which is so much better than warrior utility. Resto Shaman, actually. How did I miss this? This is actually the second best hero in the game at the moment, statistically speaking. I believe also Archon.gg agrees on this fact, possibly because if you're gonna stray away from the meta comp, you might need the Resto Shaman Bloodlust. The Curse Dispel is pretty good. Spirit Link is the second best type of defensive after Discipline Priest for almost any group content. Surprisingly, it is here with an atrocious damage profile that almost tickles the enemies, so this goes to show that this would probably be one of those seasons where healer DPS doesn't matter that much. Maybe that's why we don't see Mistweavers even higher, but even with that said, obviously we're still talking about an 8-tier spec, and before the big priest buffs of 2024 and 2025, Resto Shaman was the premier healer back at the beginning of the War Within, so nothing really changed for it, just everybody else getting a little bit of a nerf, which is why we're probably seeing it back up again. And last but not least, despite all of the nerfs, Vengeance Demon Hunter retains its S tier position as the numero uno tank. Now, I don't know if it's in front or behind Discipline Priest. I don't think it matters because the top comps include both of them at the same time, so it would be weird for them not to be equal in terms of the overall performance. The nerf to Sigil of Silence didn't really change much, nor was it really needed, because you only really wanted Sigil of Silence for interrupts, not necessarily for the silence. 2-second silence is, I guess, a whatever thing. If anything, Vengeance might even be a little bit squishier than Prot Warrior. I'm not convinced it does more damage either. So you're basically being carried by obviously the demon brand, the debuff, which is obviously really good considering the top DPS specs are Balanced Druid, Mage, Arcane or Fire at the moment, who even knows, and Unholy, which a large part of his damage is magical. Is Blood Beast physical? I don't even know anymore. Does it even matter? Whatever Unholy does, it just does it really well. But Vengeance retains its position as the #1 tank, and to be fair, it does have the most amount of variety in terms of its playstyle, and normally that's something that we regard as something fun and not really performance driven or affecting it. But in this case, the fact that you have variety in talents can give you access to different types of builds. You can get cheat death builds, you can get more tankiness builds, you can get more DPS builds, you can get more CC builds depending on what your group needs or what that dungeon particularly requires, which is really good to have in a tank. And that's not the only role or class that has that utility. You also have that in the Windwalker Monk, a really, really good and very overlooked spec to bring into your Mythic Plus. Why would you even do that? Well, first of all, I believe it's the best DPS spec for a +10 and to clear all the +10s, and it does really well in hierarchies as well. And if you don't believe me, watch this video and then tell me how wrong I am in the comments.